Ladies and gentlemen, the boys are back. This is Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Joined by my good friend Mark Ostrander and our good friend, back from circumnavigating, I think I said that word right, the globe, been all over, was at a wedding, was doing his weird food post of the day every day from Paris. Shane Goodell, the entire Nike team, absolutely crushing it out there. Our guy, Grant Turner. GT, how are you, my friend?
Oh, just getting back to normal life. Yeah, I was gone on the road for a while. Left to go to Paris on July 18th, got home August 12th, had one day at home, and then flew to the USA Wrestling State Leaders Conference. Got a chance to reconnect with all of the state leaders on Thursday, and then took a 3.5, 4 hour picturesque drive to Hayden, Colorado, up by Steamboat Springs for one of my buddy's weddings, and finally got back home on Monday, and then slowly crawling out of my work-related hole this week. So just happy to be back in the great state of Iowa and not being on the road for a little bit.
Well, you and I got a chance to talk twice, once between Fargo and Paris, and once last couple days. But I know Mark wanted to ask you, but just overall, your thoughts on the Olympics. You cover multiple sports. Obviously on this podcast, what were your thoughts on the Olympic wrestling, the venue, the ups and downs, highs and lows, what you thought of America's performance, probably your thoughts on Japan, those kind of things?
Well, I think the biggest thing from the Olympic movement was that we didn't have the collection of fans, spectators, and just what the Olympics are in Tokyo. To have that be rekindled and that Olympic flame basically for the entire populace to be able to go watch different sports, go be a part of it, having all of the community back together in Paris was great. My personal opinion, being there for so long, I felt like the city of Paris did a very good job accommodating the influx of people. I think every single venue was full. There was no sport that I went to, and we went to 10 or 12 different sports while we were there, that they were lacking fandom or having, open seats or anything like that. So I thought it was really, really, really well attended. And once again, there were some really, really cool venues, very historic places with Paris. The Grand Palais for fencing, which is a historic venue for that sport. Beach volley, right underneath the Eiffel Tower, was so cool for the the fans, the athletes, everything. The Champ de Mars arena for wrestling was very intimate, very tight, very there wasn't a bad seat in that place. So as far as the wrestling was concerned, and we say this every year when we get back from the NCAAs, we get back from the US Open, you're like, holy cow, how many crazy matchups, how many crazy matches did we just get to witness, right? So, we talk about betting lines and who's a favorite and all those other things. And it's Susaki losing, pandemonium. Vinesh Phogat then missing weight, not being able to compete for an Olympic silver medal. I think one of the things that, in my opinion, having Kyle Snyder not medal, but being he's a 9-timer, was going for his 10th Olympic and or world championship medal. That, once again, that's shocking to the world. I think, Alex Sanyan not winning in Greco. Makhmadov from Kyrgyzstan not winning.
Can I go? I want to go back to the one thing you said. What was it like in the arena when Vinesh missed weight? Okay, you and me were in Texas in 21 when Jaden didn't make weight. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that just was It was like that game of telephone, right? Like where, there's 10 people in line and somebody says a story, and by the 10th person, the story is like, I had chicken soup for lunch. Like it just completely changes. I remember I was with Mark Bader from Flow because we were announcing, and he's like, Jaden missed weight. And I thought he was joking. I don't know why I thought he was joking, because Jaden was moving up. But anyway, how did you guys find out? Did you guys think that Sarah was going to get a forfeit? Like, who knew the rules? What was that like? Because I'm interested in just the whole vibe or energy of that situation.
Well, I think, once again, it was the next, whatever it is, like you got to, yeah, I don't know the exact timeline because my brain is still mush.
Right.
So I think what happened, and once again, I think all the rules are like clearly stated in the UWW tournament guideline. Is it's the same thing as like whatever it is, right? So I think they followed the rule book on exactly what their protocol was. So I don't think anybody was making stuff up as they were going.
Correct.
But I think there was a little bit of like, is Sarah just going to win? Like, is it just a forfeit? Or like, because once again, I'm not very well versed on the international weight allowance. Like, what happens if someone doesn't miss weight or make weight the next day? I have, especially for finals, right? So it's like,
it never happened.
I've maybe only seen it in the repechage, like where it's like, all right, well then he's just not wrestling, right? So then the guy just moves on, and he goes towards his bronze medal, and it's like he just didn't make weight. But like on the front side of the bracket, you guys would have to like do some serious deep dive to be able to find out who or when have that ever happened, either in the United States and or internationally, where ranking series, like people just don't miss weight, right? So
you bring up an interesting thing on the repechage. So say like, it'd be really interesting to see, like, let's say I lost in the semi. Okay. So I'm in the third place match, right? And then I don't make weight. Okay. Yep. And let's just say I beat Mark first round and you second round, just to keep it simple. I'm not saying better. So Mark would wrestle you, and then you would have wrestled me, or the winner of that would wrestle me. Do we go now to the other quarterfinal loser, or do they just bump them out? Because that's what they did. So it feels like they have a different process for the repechage than they do for the front side of the bracket.
Yeah, hang on, David, so people understand. You lost in the semis. It wouldn't be the guys you've wrestled to come back in to wrestle you. It would have been.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah, so, no, you're 100% right.
So there wouldn't have been ever like a time where like that could have happened. But like basically, like let's say for instance, David, you go for your third place bout and you miss weight the next day. Me and Mark just wrestled for the bronze.
So Rich Bender beats in order Mark, Grant, David. Okay. And then I miss weight. So it should have been Mark and Grant wrestle, and the winner wrestles me for third. Now that just becomes the third place match.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, because we both lost to the person that made finals.
This is kind of off topic, but it's something that I noticed, and I don't know if anybody else did. Watching these major events, the World Cup, the Olympics, you're so used to Iran having those noisemakers, whatever those things are, making the noise. They were not allowed to do it. Did you notice that when you were there, that they weren't able to do that, and it didn't have a different feel for you?
I think it, I definitely noticed it. I think that there was enough like loud chants and things like that basically we could, that people could do. But yeah, having the horns and stuff.
Yep.
It is what it is. I think it's a part of the World Championships. It's a part of the World Cup. It's a part of like, some of the other tournaments where Iran is represented very well. It's the Olympic Games. It's a different animal in itself.
But this is the first time in the Olympics that they could not do that. If I over the last few Olympics, they were able to do it, but Paris said no.
I mean, I couldn't speak to it. I mean, I just noticed that it wasn't there, but like, I didn't think that, once again, there was so much going on during those time periods, like just ebbs and flows of different things that were occurring that just, some of that stuff gets lost in the shuffle as you're like, oh, well, there's no horns in here. Like, that's like 115th down on my priority level.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's kind of how I was thinking about it. Yeah,
but it is something, Mark, that 100% you're like 100% accurate on it. Like the Iranian fans, they love wrestling. They want it to be a showcase. They know everybody in the world. They definitely and they also had a really, really good Olympics. So but I think as far as performances are concerned, I think we can get into that and we can do a deep dive on it. But I think I come away from the tournament just thinking that like wrestling's in such a good place. I thought the wrestling itself in all three styles was electric. I thought there was great matches in every single style. We got to see history being made in every single style. Lopez winning his 5th consecutive gold medal. I think Bahrain having its first ever gold medal at the Olympics. I think it was the first ever medalist from Ecuador. I think there's tons of different like things that were going on that we could spend an entire pod just on the ins and outs of that tournament.
What did you think of Japan's performance? Because they absolutely crushed it.
Yeah, I think well, the women, they did a really good job. I thought even though they stumbled at a couple of weight classes, they still medaled. Susaki getting bronze, Ozaki getting bronze, and she she bumped up from 62 in order to try to make the Olympic team. So, and on the men's side of things, I think that probably the biggest surprise was probably more the men's freestyle than the men's Greco, because we knew that Sarshan Bekoff and Fumita, like at 60, were going to have those guys were already extremely talented. Like you're not surprised by those guys performing. But I definitely think that like Takatani and I can't think of the hold on.
65.
65.
Yeah.
Kiyoka.
Yeah.
And I apologize for all of my Japanese fans.
Your Japanese friend, Mirikitani.
Yes. But I think, Rei Higuchi, winning, he's been a dog for a really long time. So once again, seeing him in the finals or even in a medal match, I thought he wrestled extremely well. I think that, I was a little bit more surprised by the 65 kilo guy, being able to, win that weight class because it's a very difficult weight class with tons of guys in it. Takatani wrestled extremely well against Dake. I thought great match by him. So I think that Japan's medal count was ridiculous. Like they did so well in all three styles, all three phases, which was really cool to see. I think that any country that has a great Olympics be like, yeah, kudos to you guys. Like something's going right over there.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I think you're accurate, but it's also absurd. You said the women stumbled at a couple weights. They had 4 gold and 2 bronze. Like if any country had 4 gold and 2 bronze in any of the 3 styles, that's a parade, And that just tells you the level or, the standard is the standard there. Right. So.
Well, I think that why I say stumbled is that like Susaki is basically undefeated.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm not contradicting what you're saying. I'm saying that's how good they are. Yeah.
Well, and I would even say like those girls have been so good. Like Sakurai has been good for the entire quad. Motokai has been good for the entire quad. Kagami's been good for the entire quad. Ozaki's been good for the entire quad. Like these are like super big professionals that have like been good for a really long time. So no super surprises, but like, 50, the girl at 50 losing, surprise. So crazy tournament.
What are your thoughts? I guess, well, we can save this for another day because we'll talk about non-Olympic world weight classes. And I think that'll lead organically to a conversation about which of our athletes are going to retire, stay. Some have already been announced, but we can GT, you probably have the best perspective of the 3 of us Summer Olympics 28, Los Angeles. I think it's one like all of us would try. I mean, you'll obviously be there. I'm hoping over the next 4 years to earn my place there professionally. But if not, I think, travel costs and stuff like that, you just go, like, it's going to be the most affordable one by far to go to LA versus, Paris or anywhere else in the world. For somebody who's been to the Olympics, and, it's not like you're just sitting in the stands, like you're interacting with people. I saw, all right, what was the outfit you were given? Because that was epic. Okay. And it seemed like an amazing gift. And I'm like, so tell me about that.
Oh yeah. So, as a representative of Nike, and, once again, it's part of what we do is that, like, we represent different countries. And so I have a relationship with the Mongolian Wrestling Federation, and, their general secretary was nice enough to gift me one of their Olympic opening ceremony uniforms or concepts, and just basically as a sponsor and also like someone that helps them out growing the sport of wrestling in their country. It was just a gift of appreciation for what we do for them and what we're able to do for some of their individual athletes. So really, really cool and humbled by that.
It's meaningful.
Gift. Yeah, extremely meaningful for me because we're truly trying to grow the sport there, and the general secretary is doing everything he possibly can in order to have Mongolia be really good. And he was basically heartbroken because they got like fifth, I think, like 6 times. So it was like,
oh my god,
it was crazy. They were in like the bronze medal match, I think, in like 4 girls weights and I think like 2 freestyle weights. So it was like crazy.
Wow. Well, Mark's our big social media guy, but Mark, you probably didn't see it, but the outfit is epic. I'm being sarcastic, but it's epic. Like, so GT, we mentioned this last week. We're very proud of you. Also, happy birthday belatedly on the air. We did wish you happy birthday on the air.
You posted the time we did it. Second time it did.
So this is the 3rd time we wished him happy birthday. Yeah. So anyway, all right. So we'll stay on sort of the Olympic style stuff. And RBY goes to the Oklahoma State RTC. I don't know if that's going to be called the Cowboy RTC. I don't want to misname it, but he's going to Stillwater. Okay, so a couple things here. He is now an athlete for Mexico. So this is important. He will not compete with Dayton except internationally. So in other words, like if Dayton goes to the non-Olympic trials at 61, RBY cannot go to that. Okay, Dayton now has Gilman and RBY to work out with. David Taylor said in his press conference that a robust RTC was important, that specifically he believed in Dayton Fix and wanted to help make him a world champion. Mark, thoughts on this move and the overall impact on OSU, like how this impacts? It feels like recruiting wise, if you have those 3 guys in the room, you can probably recruit any lightweight in the country.
This is something, and I didn't say RBY going to Oklahoma State, something I saw coming, but what they're doing there, the way they're building it is exactly what I thought David Taylor and his staff would try to do. And RBY is a big get for them. Obviously, they're going to be really good in the lower weights with those guys to work out with, showing them what they need to know, doing the things that they do. It's going to be interesting in 28 what happens when both of them go down to 57 kilos and they're both trying to make the Olympic team and they're basically working out with each other. So they're going to know each other, and they already do know each other, but it's going to be interesting what happens there.
Yes, certainly it's a possibility, right? But okay, it's a really, really hard cut for RBY, right? And I know Dayton makes it, and I'm friends with that family, and Stacy says he makes it and it's not that bad. But if it was easy, he would go 125 in college.
Yeah.
I mean, there's empirical data that says
sure.
And I understand winning at the NCAA level making the finals every freaking year but one is different than being the best in the world, okay? But he's also been a silver medalist at that non-Olympic weight, okay? So I wouldn't be too worried. I think, too, it's like you recruit two really good kids at a weight, right? Like first world problems, you know? And I think Gilman, you hear all kinds of great things as a coach, okay? And now that he's not competing, but he's literally fresh out of competing, right? Like just wrestled in April, okay? And Gilman's a guy that obviously RBY has to have a lot of respect for, or else he wouldn't have gone there, right? Like if somehow they didn't get along in Pennsylvania, he wouldn't be there.
Sure.
And feels like that guy can help his game. And the other thing is, I think RBY is eventually going to go in MMA. That's a big thing too, right? Like kids, more and more kids see that as a path to make money eventually. So, I mean, like kind of off subject, but Nick Piccinini just got a last minute call up. He's fighting on Dana White Contender Series on Tuesday.
Cool.
For a UFC contract. Nick's a friend of our family's, Oklahoma State guy. Probably one of the biggest upsets of all time when he pinned Spencer in the duel. So GT, we're just talking about this RBY thing to OSU, the RTC, obviously. You know, Mark says it's great, but eventually maybe 2028 there's a conflict. My position is he's right, but that's a 4-year away problem versus a 46 months, 42 months of, I think, higher level. And then in terms of recruiting. So your thoughts on this?
Well, I think once again, if that ever happens, like at the Worlds and or Olympics, like we're talking about maybe one match a year.
Right.
You know, like we're not talking about like we're competing at the US Open Final X, you know, Bill Farrell, and then also the Pelicone every year for those guys. Like, I think once again, I think it's to your point when you were saying like, you know, these are good problems to have. It's like, there's only so many high level people in the world that can help you train, and having somebody in your own room that's at that level is only helpful, in my opinion. It's not a detriment to, you know, whatever it is that you guys got going on, but it's like, okay, I talked about this with some of the guys at the Olympics. It's like, it's hard to find good heavyweights to help train anywhere. Like there's not that many big guys competing at that level in order to be training partners. And I would say also the exact same thing for, you know, like any professional athletics. Like there's only so many people that can be at your level. I mean, there's still people that can compete at extremely high levels. I mean, I think we've seen that in our domestic system where there's some high school kids and college kids that can wrestle at that level as well. But, you know, when you become a pro, like there's not many people living that lifestyle, right? So
the herd thins for sure.
Like Grant was saying, this is so different than what we've seen in the past, like in the Iowa room when you had Gilman and you had who was it that was in North Carolina? Ramos. You know, and then you had Don Dennis come in and wrestle against Ramos. And, you know, there was a thing in the room, who's going to coach who? And he was supposed to be my coach. And this is going to be different because RBY is wrestling for Mexico. It is completely different. They're trying to get Dayton on the U.S. team, and they're trying to keep RBY on the Mexican team.
But you bring up a really good point. Okay, so like it's different, but same. Like, let's say one's on mat 1 and one's on mat 2. Like, who's coaching who? Right? Like, that was one of the things. Like they said at the Olympics that Cody Sanderson was normally coaching RBY, but Mark McKnight was in his corner at the Olympics. I mean, I think we spoke about this back in April, how few corners Cael Sanderson was in and how many corners Bo Nickel was in. I also think, too, this, like, in general, when you're on this side of things, right, like when you're on the media side of it, right, you look for problems. You look for things to talk about, right? Like, it's like a soap opera. Like, if everybody's just happy, there's no show, right? Like, when you're coaching, like, if Grant gets 3 amazing guys at Grandview that would all be ranked number 1, 2, and 3 in the country at 149 pounds, Grandview's not looking at it as a problem. People on the outside are like, well, man, I don't know what they're going to do. And like, well, two of them are going to probably make the finals. One of them's going to bump up to 157 and probably take third. Like, I mean, I think that's how this is a million years ago. But when we had Duran and Jamel and they were both at 197, I told my dad, I go, all I know is this, we're going to win nationals at 197. Like, I don't know what, like we're going to figure it out. One of them's going to redshirt, one of them's going to go down, one of them's going to go up. GT's point about talent and as it thins out is huge. And it's not even the same. Like little guys can get workouts because you can just rotate bigger guys in on them, right? But that's also when injuries happen. And like I can only imagine if I was a 57, 61 kg guy getting a workout with Gilman, who knows how to work out, who's won enough in his life that he's not trying to win every live practice go. Like it's not an ego thing for him. I mean, the guy has been at the top of the food chain. So he can give you whatever look he needs to give you. Like if he needs to beat you up that day, he will. But if, you're cutting or you're coming off injury or just, you did a bunch of really hard cardio, you just did a bunch of hard circuits and you just need a spar. I think that's probably where the trust, it feels like that's where the trust is with RBY. Like, hey, I've been through all this with Thomas and he was there for me. And I've had Thomas on the podcast on Matt Chat, and he talked about how if you don't get to a leg on RBY, he's behind you so fast you don't even know what happened. And that alone, because, I think it's fair to say Dayton's got to get to more offense, right? Like Dayton Fix firing off shots his freshman and sophomore year in college was more vintage Dayton Fix than his last year. And GT's the one guy that picked Dayton every year to win nationals in our pool. He's ride or die with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so GT, like the more he fires off shots and gets in scrambles, the better Dayton is. But the caveat to that is you got to get to a leg or at least get to a defensible position off the counter shot. And if you can work with that with an RBY, you're probably not getting go behind by that many people in the world. His go behinds are elite. So I feel like that alone, that one piece of it helps Dayton tremendously, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've now gone into like complete coaching, technical part of the pod, but I think but
we love that part of it.
I know. I think how we can transition this from kind of the Cowboy RTC, bringing everybody in, RBY, Gilman, Fix, the whole thing. Is it like in the easiest phrase is like iron sharpens iron. So if you need to be able to get some of those things to be able to replicate your game in order to go behind or get more active. Also just in general, like I truly believe that those three have the most different styles too.
Diverse skill sets for sure. Yeah.
So I think you're going to get like a whole bunch of like different looks and feels and like everything that you could possibly imagine between those three guys, not to mention everybody else that's already in the room, like, Spratley and Hughes. And
how much better does Troy Spratley get this year, right? Like that. He's going to have to be a super tough kid mentally because there's going to be a lot of days he didn't get a takedown.
I was going to say, well, it could go either way. Either he could be like, oh, this is so awesome. Or he's like, not another day of this.
Can I go over to Stillwater High School and just work out for a day?
No. I'm going with a red shirt today. Like, no, you're not.
No, you're not. Yeah. Yeah. If he can survive that mental gauntlet, it feels like, even if it's just spar days, right? Like the live days might be terrible for him, but the spar days are going to be so good where you can work with people. Like Messenbrink's dad wrestled for my dad, and I ran into him at the hotel in Iowa Penn State, and I asked him how it was going. And he's like, well, Mitchell wrestled in this match a week ago, and he struggled getting out of legs. He goes, so they just put him with Zane on Monday and Tuesday, and that's all they worked on. That's, like if a kid's losing a hand fight, like, hey, you're going with Gilman today. Like, hey, you're getting beat on go behind, you're going with RBY. Like, hey, you're getting lost in the scrambles on the waterfall position, you're going with Dayton. I mean, I think that's at least a small piece of it. And Grant, you and I know those Oklahoma State folks pretty well. We're actually, I already called ahead and made sure your golf foursome is directly in front of mine. So I can try to hit into you and Shane as often as possible. As long as you're 200 yards out, though, you're safe, right, Mark?
As long as you're anywhere near the fairway, you're good. Don't be in the rough. Anywhere in the rough or in the trees, you got a good shot.
In the trees, I can get you. Yeah. But we know they're not done trying to make that program relevant again. I think like 18th, 14th, 10th is something that they don't ever want a 3-year cycle like that again. So this is bigger picture. That's a part of that. So, okay, non-Olympic trials. So those are the weekend of September 14th, which are coming right up. Omaha, Nebraska, the entries will start rolling out. Let me make sure I explain this right. Grant, correct me if I'm wrong. If you wrestled in the Olympic weight, you can't, at the Olympics, you can't wrestle in this. Everybody else is eligible. So like an Olympic alternate is eligible, like Gilman, who's clearly not wrestling. David Taylor is clearly not wrestling. But like a Zahid can wrestle in this, okay? And so probably will at 92. I mean, he was a world medalist at 92. So I don't know the procedure yet. Like if you were a medalist at the non-Olympic weight, do you sit or is it just you're the number 1 seed? Do you know anything about that yet, GT?
No. I do know that it's more of an open than a qualification thing. So like I'm sure that they'll have whatever it is based off of the Olympic trials at the other weight classes, even though they're at non-Olympic weights, or we could even go back to the US Open. I think some of that stuff, seeding criteria will be separation of whatever it is. But yeah, it's gonna be wild.
Bo Nickel posted out there because of the ADCs this last weekend, which people know that. We'll get into that for a second here, but big, huge jiu-jitsu tournament. And he posted that he would give anybody $10,000 if they entered the non-Olympic trials and could last 1 period if they didn't have a wrestling background. And so that's pretty savage. And I think that's the whole wrestlers do better in jiu-jitsu right away than jiu-jitsu guys do in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, GT, I spoke to our guy Michael Pixley a couple days ago, and for people that don't know Pix, he wrestled at Grandview. I know him. He actually did his first jiu-jitsu at my house, which is, I knew him through wrestling. I met him at a clinic with Jason Keck and some guys, and he was living near me at the time. He still lives like maybe 45 minutes away, but we sent him over to Heath Pedago's. But he entered that tournament. He'd won the West Coast ADCCs, and so qualified and made the semis, lost to Rafael Lovato, referee's decision, and then lost to Cyborg for third. But the big match was in the quarterfinals. He hit a beautiful Uchimata to a Darce and submitted Marigala, who's one of the best guys in the world. We could do a whole podcast on the somewhat insanity of belts because Pixley's only a purple belt and submitted a black belt. But Michael did really well. He's in a really good place in his life right now, GT. And, as a former coach of his and, and as somebody that started, was able to be part of his process. All these guys are just doing good things in life. And he's living such a productive life now, like he's doing clinics, he's giving back to kids, he's helping coach high school. We're both, I know, really proud of Michael, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that, Pix grew up through the USA Wrestling system. So it's like all of these things kind of like tie into, like Piccinini, USA Wrestling guy, right? DC, Pix, like as these people have gone on, it's their fundamental base comes all through the USA Wrestling platform. And then, like the international experience or, making world teams and all that kind of stuff. So I'm so super happy for those guys that make that great transition. And especially for someone like Pix to be able to then go on and do some big things after his wrestling career and then, transition to a new frontier is great to see. So
Pix just sent me a text. They're selling t-shirts now of that mid hip toss of Marigala. So hopefully
how cool is it, David Grant, that Jordan Burroughs is going to wrestle?
Yeah, I think
the world team. So
Yeah.
Somebody was talking about what if Burroughs wrestled Messenbrink and this time in Nebraska instead of Pennsylvania? That, it'd be interesting. I mean, 79 kilos is 173.8, so 174. So Messenbrink's not a huge 65, but it would certainly be an interesting match. I think we just don't know right now who's entered, and that's one of the downsides of certain wrestling tournaments. Like, that was one of the advantages of the Olympics minus the boycotts and changes, is like you could talk for months about this and that and like where are these guys going to get drawn in and stuff like that. And for people in the media, it's way better to talk about that, right? Well, I don't know, it's going to be a good tournament and we'll see what happens. And that's just the nature of some things. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many runs Burroughs has left in him. I think some people are surprised he did this, but it would be interesting if he were to do this, qualify and medal, then he sits in Final X at the non-Olympic weight. And then if Dake comes up, like how they seed that, because Dake would have the Final X at the Olympic weight. Does that put him in the semifinals? Does he actually have to, go through extra matches to get to Burroughs? I mean, that whole process could be fascinating. Speaking of USA Wrestling events, U17s have been going on and are going on right now. So shout out to the Rainey brothers, first and third in the Greco side of it. And he didn't do as well as them, but shout out to my guy, Joe Jeter, who took fifth over there. I pretty much talked to his dad every day while he was over there. And the Rainies just let it rip, Mark. I mean, those guys are not interested in 2-1 parterre. They give points up, but that's their nature. Like they're so fun to watch, right?
It's going to be fun to see them where they end up going to college and bringing that skill set with them wherever they go, because there's a lot of schools that are going to just absolutely love that kind of free for all, go get the points, I'm going to give points up, but watch what I can do mentality. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to them.
Yeah. GT, those guys seem like the kind of guys that if they went to a non-top 5 kind of program, maybe a top 5 program, but for sure like a 6 through 10, they could literally change the culture of the program. Like they have a great relationship with Medlin and the University of Illinois right now. It feels like if those guys go to Illinois, and full disclosure, I consider Brian Medlin to be a very good friend of mine, and I have tremendous respect for him. If for no other reason than alone, he's probably able to find more difficult to find wrestling matches on the dark web than anybody I know. But on a serious note, he just does a great job. But if those kids went to Illinois, those are the kind of guys that people go, I want to go wrestle with those kids, right? Like they feel like they're program changers, right?
Well, I think when you get somebody like that, and I think that's had like the really good success at those age group categories as they continue to progress, is like that success kind of follows those kids, especially if they're, got their head screwed on straight. And there's tons of guys that we could go back and look through the history of USA Wrestling where they like got a cadet medal or a junior medal and they could not handle life and or college and or adulting. But I think like with these kids, like they can come into a program and just be like a leader, like right away, and be like, hey, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So, and I think also what you said about Medlin is completely true. And like, I think he's really good for the kids, and, he cares about wrestling at an extremely high level. So, anybody that does that has a good place for kids to develop.
He brought the singlet pull for the air from the Russians. He brought that over on the in between the breaks. So the Rainies, I think the two words that come to mind when I watch those kids wrestle are relentless and just nonstop. Like, and fear, maybe 3 words, fearless. Like they are way more interested in beating you 20-10 than 10-0. Like they're not afraid. And they got lifted. Like, well, the one kid got lifted a couple times. One kid was down 6-0 and ran him down. Like, there's certain guys we've all coached. If they're losing 6-0, I don't care if it's freestyle, folk style, Greco, tiddlywinks, cornhole. You're like, they're done. Like, they don't have it in them. And there's other guys like this dude should have killed our guy because he's alive and Mark's got that smile on his face. Like, you're smiling because you agree, right? Like, there's certain guys we've all coached, like, we're winning the third period in folk style, the second period in international wrestling. We're winning that. We just don't know by how much. We might run out of time, but that's the way we're going to lose. We're not going to lose because we broke, gave up, didn't just shoot the moon, go for it kind of thing. These Rainey kids are like that, man. They just go.
Yep. I had a kid that wrestled. I've had a few kids like that, but I had one, Paul Jen, who wrestled for me. And quarterfinals at the national tournament, he's down 8-0 in the first period. And this kid winks at me that's beating him like a drum. And it's just the start of the second period. And I said to the kid that winked at me, oh, he hasn't even started yet. And we ended up teching him. He was down 8-0 and teched him. Just broke the kid in half. So that's the Rainey brothers.
GG, the moral of that story is don't wink at O. It doesn't end well. So that's reserved for Dana only. She's the only one allowed to wink.
Right.
So,
I had a heavyweight do it to Cain Velasquez in the quarterfinals at nationals too. That didn't go so well for him either.
And two famous guys, like, what Kane did after that. And Paul Jen was the one to beat Cale during Cale's redshirt year. So very, very nice name drops, Mark. The fact they're true stories is even more clutch. So
they are true.
I said the fact that they're
I
know.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I know.
Okay. All right. So Stephen Buchanan to Iowa. Now there's all these different rumors about this. I can tell you what I know. Cam Sikora from Oklahoma and I spoke. We've been speaking for a week because he's looking for a 97-pounder. Okay, so I mean, this is directly from him. This is not hearsay. Like, I probably talked to that guy 5 times last week because there's a kid I know that's interested in going there and they're trying to work it out. So this leads to a conversation. We have like 15 minutes left. This is this whole portal thing, okay? And the portal's now open and closed at certain times, but they reopened it for a window like the beginning of August. The bigger picture of this, and I'm really torn on this because I'm a capitalist, but I think capitalism may kill us here, is what's going to happen with these revenue share teams and non-revenue share teams. But before I get into that, Mark, you bleed orange and black. Stephen Buchanan to Iowa. I'm sorry, black and gold. Excuse me, black and gold.
Where did orange come in?
My fault. I'm still thinking about RBY. My fault. You bleed Iowa colors. How excited are you about Buchanan coming to the Hawks?
Well, I'm going to be totally honest with you, David. I didn't even know what happened until you told me before we started the podcast, and I didn't have a chance to ask you what you're talking about. So,
so this should be a very guttural reaction.
Let's see. He's ranked number 2 in the country preseason. So, yeah, I'd say it's a good get for Iowa. Does he have 2 years left?
I think he's got 1. I'd have to look it up. I mean, I don't know. I can look it up.
Too. I could be wrong.
Go ahead.
Could be wrong.
I mean, instead of us looking stuff up, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, they're trying to compete with the best teams in the country. And to do that, you have to have the best kids at the weights. And they just bring in a finalist to go with the other guys that they have. I just think it makes them stronger. Do I love what's going on in wrestling? No. Do I love that you have a guy there that really had a good year last year, didn't have a great national tournament, but placed, second in the Big Ten, was undefeated going into the Big Ten, beat some good kids during the year, and now he's kind of on the outside looking in. Same thing with Ratchie, made the national tournament for the first time, had some good wins during the year, beat Penn State, and now they brought in Parko. So it's, you can look at it different ways. Tom Brands is hired to put the best team that he can possibly on the mat. He's just trying to do his job. Everybody else is doing it. He has to follow suit or he's going to get run over.
Yeah, to answer your question, Buchanan wrestled in 1920, 2021, 21-22, redshirted in 22-23, and wrestled in 23-24. So he's wrestled 4 years, but one of those years was the COVID year, so he has 1 year left.
Okay.
I mean, because you get 5 to get 4. So.
Well, you actually you can get 6 to get 5 if you get a COVID year. He may have 2.
He's already wrestled in 4 national tournaments, Mark.
But 1 didn't count, David.
Right. So he's got 1 left.
He wrestled in 4. If 4 doesn't count, he's wrestled in 3. Okay. All right.
I think I'm right.
All right. You probably are.
Yeah. So
I'm just gonna back out of this because there's math involved. So you guys just have yourself a day.
That's fair. That's fair.
COVID's really confused me. I don't know where anybody's
no, it's
at.
tricky.
We're almost done with it.
Yeah.
So
the other thing
is Gable Stevenson coming back again? Anybody know? Anybody heard?
I think he's going to make that practice squad for the Bills, don't you,
okay.
GT?
He's played. Yeah. I mean, I haven't got a chance. I mean, once again, I haven't watched any United States sports since June, so I haven't watched any of the preseason. But
what an elite flex that is!
I told everybody, I'm like, we could have had, like
Armageddon.
We could have had like something horrible happen. Like I don't know, like something crazy. I'm like, yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so the Anthony Holman thing, he is the director of wrestling for the NCAA. There are different reports coming out, but one of the reports is that teams opt in or out of this revenue share. And then one of the reports is that they would have to have separate NCAA tournaments. Okay, so like if 35 teams opt in and 35 teams opt out, I talked to a D1 coach about this, and he goes, if that's right, it's almost like football where there's like a Division I and a Division 1A, like where North Dakota State wins it every year in football. So I had other coaches tell me that's not true. People reporting on it. And then I listened to Willie, and I love Willie. I actually spoke to him yesterday, but I listened to him on his podcast go, if the coaches get together and vote on this, the NCAA probably doesn't care, and they can keep it at 1 tournament. I think maybe he's right, but I think here's the thing. If you're a school that has a guy that does pretty good, and these handlers are already calling these kids, like before the NCAA tournament finishes, is the minute they can go in the portal, and like, hey, we have money for you. Do you really want to do something to help those teams, like to go, well, yeah, we'll wrestle in that tournament with them, even though anytime we develop a guy that scores 6th place points, we're going to lose him because we don't have enough money to keep him. So, Mark, you're our resident economics major on this. So, what are your thoughts on this? No, what are your thoughts?
I think it's nuts, but I mean that's common English I'm trying to use here. I don't understand what they're trying to do. I understand what the revenue sharing is supposed to mean, but to me, the revenue sharing is for football, basketball. Those are the 2 sports it's for. The other sports, you're just going to have to survive. And I think wrestling will survive. I think the other schools, the smaller schools that may not want to get into revenue sharing are not going to want to get out of the Division I national tournament because it's something these kids work for their whole lives, and they're not going to have the recruits that they get. And there's kids that do place at the national tournament from smaller schools, and they may get poached later on, but it still builds that school's reputation up. So I think it's probably going to be, you're not going to see much of a difference for wrestling. Now, I'm not saying other sports, it's not going to happen.
Okay, maybe I'm not explaining it right. What the story being told is, if the school opts in or out, and they're going to make a decision based on football and basketball, okay, they're opting in and out as an athletic department, not as a wrestling team.
Yes.
Then let me pick a ridiculous example. If Iowa opted out of revenue sharing, then Iowa, if this theory is right, would not be allowed to wrestle in the big boy national tournament. And then here's another one that's really interesting. What happens to the Ivies? Okay, but what I think is like a Wyoming that's traditionally competitive, does well, really good in duels. You know, don't have 5 All-Americans every year, but qualify a bunch of guys, usually put a guy or 2 on the podium. They're probably not going to opt in. Like they don't have a football team or a basketball team we're talking about. And that's not Mark Branch's fault. I mean, that's just that school.
What about South Dakota State? Same thing. They've actually had some really.
So I'm saying when you say it's not going to change, do you still think it's not going to change?
I don't understand enough about it to say that I think the wrestling programs are going to want to stay where they're at. What the athletic programs do at all these schools, I have no idea, David.
Well, I agree. I think we all agree with that. I mean, Mark, you agree, right? Like, or GT, rather, you agree, right? That like the wrestling programs don't want to get demoted, but if their athletic department says this is what we're doing, then this is what we're doing. And I also think low key, this is probably not good for women's wrestling at the Division I level. Because now to bring on a sport is going to be even tougher at this point. So your thoughts on that?
I think we're in unprecedented times in collegiate athletics, and I don't think that anybody really has a crystal ball to see how any of this is going to shake out. So a lot of this is just pure speculation when it comes to, you know, once again, we haven't gone through conference realignment yet. We haven't done, you know, NIL for an entire season yet. You know, we haven't done, you know, even some of the Olympic sport development stuff, like where all of this collectives are going to get the athletes paid this year. I think that there's so many irons in the collegiate athletic fire that we truly don't know. And then we also talk about like the roster, like everybody going to like full scholarships and then roster quotas. And there is so much more that we are going to learn in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months about what collegiate athletics actually looks like and what is going to transpire for Olympic sport categories. I think it's, to your guys' point, it's an athletic department decision for a lot of these things. There's also conference decisions. I think there's a lot of, you have to take a look at, you know, once again, athletic department budgets, like they're going to have to come up with a lot more money. You know, the fundraising is going to be different. I think that there's so many different things that are going to happen. And once again, to your point, I truly don't know what's going to happen. And I think that anybody that even is at the top of the heap, like NCAA president or even athletic directors, a lot of these athletic directors are in a holding pattern to really figure out what's going on. And you can see that by like facility construction. Yes. You know, we've talked about that already on the pod before with Illinois, like needing a new wrestling room. The AD just basically pulls the reins back and he's like, hey, at this time, we don't know if this is the best use for the $5 million that it's going to take in order to be constructing a brand new wrestling facility.
Iowa State, same thing.
Iowa State, same thing. I think that some of these even Power 5 conferences that are maybe at the lower end of the Power 5 tree, and once again, I'm not going to say any specific schools, but like, because I don't know their financial situation or athletic situation, but you know, some of those people, like they're in a power conference, but they probably could get eaten up by the top dog within each. Like, once again, Ohio State and Michigan, they have a lot of money. They have a lot of alumni. They have a lot of, you know, perennial football success. Like, they're going to be just fine. But, you know, once again, for a school that might not have that historic run or anything like that, might be in a tough spot when it comes to the Olympic sport categories. Once again, I'm just projecting and like speculating at this point. I don't have any factual data to like back up some of the stuff that we maybe will be able to discuss. It's just, I don't think that anybody really knows what it's going to look like.
No, and we say this every time something happens, but it bears repeating. This wrestling is not anywhere near the frontal lobe of the NCAA. They don't care. This is all about, here's what you gotta understand. The NCAA is trying to stay in business because if these teams could all figure out a way to get out of that basketball contract, they could fire all these guys. Okay. And then a bunch of people that aren't doing anything for a living would lose their jobs. And I mean, and they like, there's one thing that they propose, and it really bothers me when people just lie out loud. And we all know they're lying and nobody says anything. So the NCAA said they're now going to review every NIL deal over $600. I just want to tell you how preposterous that is. There's 85 football players on a team, scholarship. There's at least 50 teams that play. That's 4,250 kids. There's at least 100 basketball teams that play. And there's 15 kids on those rosters. There's another 1,500. Okay? You're now at almost 6,000 kids. Let's just say between wrestling, baseball, softball, lacrosse, all these other sports, let's pick a low number and say it's another 2,000. You're talking about over 7,000 NIL deals. Okay? There's 52 weeks in a year, 5 days in a week, 260 working days. Someone would have to review 30 deals a day. Eight hours in a day.
Yeah.
They would have to go nonstop, 15 minutes, no lunch. Okay, and let's just say you hire like a machine, a person who's just a machine to do that. How in depth can you get at 15 minutes a day or 15 minutes to review a deal? Like I go, hey, I'm going to sign Grant to a $100,000 NIL deal, and he's going to represent my car dealership. And they go, okay, sure. Who's going to follow up to see if he actually did the commercials? Like, it is preposterous. Like, and no one's talking about this. And you guys know how my brain works. I'm a business guy. I think this is such a lie. But this is just so that people can feel like, oh, well, they're going to work on this, you know? And it's just smoke and mirrors. It's a perfect time of the year. It's election time. Everybody's lying about everything. But, like, it is such a lie. Like, it just bothers me. And Mark laughs at me when I get fired up about this. But, like, I'm like, they're just lying to us. They're not going to do anything. This was like when they were like, well, you can't do – I'm not going to – okay. There's just 100 examples of this, but this is a lie. Okay? I'm going to finish the podcast on a great note. I can't remember if we talked about this last week or not, but GT wasn't with us. GT, Iowa State, got their fourth place trophy in the mail. Speaking of a lie about how much the NCAA could save by not making fourth place trophies, they somehow found the budget for it. But Dresser did a really cool video of opening. I know you don't deal with domestic sports right now, but for the rest of us that do. No, but this is near and dear to you. You're a Cyclone. So it was very cool. He did the FaceTime with the team. It was a cool moment.
I think and I think I watched a little bit of the clip, and it was like, I'm not usually a big fan of the NCAA, but I think they got this one right. I think it was
that's exactly right.
So like, I think, you know, for all intents and purposes, I think the NCAA, that's definitely a win. I think it should have happened. I'm excited for, you know, the Iowa State Cyclones in their trophy case to have that represented because they did have such a great year. So super excited for them and their staff. And
they beat the Hawks. Not that anybody's keeping track, right, Grant?
I plead the fifth on that.
No, they did. They beat Iowa at the national tournament. Now, they didn't beat them in the duel, but they did in the national
Both schools are Nike schools, so Grant will gracefully bow out. And it was domestic.
I think, you know, I think that's happened a couple of times in the history between those two schools where one would win the duel and the other one would outplace them at nationals. So it's crazy. It's crazy how that stuff all works. But, you know, once again, I think it's going to be really good for the Cyclones to be able to have that for their program, because they haven't got a trophy in a long time. So for them to get a trophy, yeah.
And it certainly, I think you certainly say the David Carr experience was a success, right? Like a program changer. that,
For sure.
Iowa State's back to relativity now. And we'll talk about the rest of the U17s next week. Maybe I'll be a little less fired up about NIL monitoring and review process. And hey,
well, before we go, David, and you guys never did, I want your opinion on Buchanan going to Iowa. What do you feel about it?
I think the obvious example is it's a huge get for them on the mat. They lost Ferrari. You and me talked about this conversation privately. Like, would you rather have the 3 Ferraris or Chittum, right? Because that was what really was the trade. Chittum said, if they're staying, I'm going. Seemingly 3 for 1 is the better deal, right? Well, they lost the older one. The middle one never wrestled. The 2 never wrestled for him. Angelo hasn't wrestled yet. Now, Chittum hasn't done what we thought he would yet, but it feels like now it's a 1 for 1 trade. A ton of negative publicity for your program. Buchanan's sort of the opposite, right? Like, nobody knows anything about that guy, but that's probably good. He's never been in any trouble. He's gone in the portal twice now. There's a perfect example of a guy that nobody really recruited, came out of Wisconsin. Wyoming developed him, but on a bad day, that guy's going to take 5th, right? So, with any bonus, that's 11, 12 points. You go from a guy that went 1 and 2 at nationals to 11 points on a bad day and 16, 18 on a good day, and you drop yourself anywhere on the spectrum of NCAA points and you add 15, depending on where, Oklahoma State was 10th last year. If you add 15 points to them, they're in the trophies. So, it's significant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, so next week we will talk about hopefully some more non-Olympic trial stuff. Okay. But I got to give a quick shout out to my pops. This dude turned 82 years old. He's coaching at 2 schools this fall. He's coaching at a high school, and he just got brought on as the volunteer assistant at Lindenwood University. So shout out to my pops. All those girls over there, Frank Tony, they're blessed to have him on board. Frank, appreciate you bringing him on. But can't pull the sheets over my head now if this man's working 2 jobs and I don't want to do my one. So he told me yesterday this will keep him busy. I'm like, this point in life, you don't have to stay busy. You can just go fishing, but he ain't built for that. So Mark, the next time you talk to my dad, you got something to talk to him about for sure.
Yes.
All right, Grant, it was great having you back. Glad you had safe travels. Keep doing it. Keep killing it. For Mark and Grant, I'm David. We'll speak to y'all next week.